Because I got in, so you can't in there, they got like Good morning. I'm going to give a quick introduction to our next speaker. Mr. Ryan Irving is a senior securities specialist for the Hillsborough County Board of Commissions and is the adjunct professor for St. Pete College and Liberty University. He graduated from the University of Central Florida with a master's degree in digital forensics. Mr. Irving will be discussing ways to identify malware on a system, including initial alerts such as local endpoint security, IDS, etc. Without further ado, I'm going to bring up Mr. Ryan Irving.
Hello, thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it very much. As you said, my name is Ryan Irving. I'm happy to be here today at BSides. Hope you guys are enjoying your day so far. So without further ado, let's go ahead and go into the presentation I have for you today, Analyzing Malware Incidents. All right, so just kind of a notice here, the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely my own and not necessarily that of my employers. Just want to say that to cover myself, although maybe they should have the interest that I do. All right, so just kind of a quick agenda of the presentation and what I plan on talking with you guys today about. We're going to talk about how you may receive an alert that you have something going on your network. All right. We're also going to talk about places where malware typically and where it likes to reside on the system. Also, how to capture an image of memory for analysis, and as well as go over some basic analysis of memory with volatility, and then briefly talk about the cuckoo sandbox. All right. So that's on what's tapped for this presentation. All right. So. As you guys work in IT, alerts can come in many forms. We may get an alert from a help desk, or maybe even a user will call us directly, all right, saying, hey, I got this pop-up on here. I have no idea what's going on, all right? Or maybe we have some sort of proxy set up, okay, where we have some sort of subscription to where it monitors, websites, and it's, looking for botnets, things like that. We may get an alert in that type of form. Or we're looking at firewall logs, where we have maybe some sort of threat intel saying, hey, this internal IP is going out to some known bad actors, things like that. Maybe you also have a SIM and you have some custom rules where you do correlation, or maybe you get your IDS logs, your IPS logs in there, and it's saying, hey, you're having this type of attack, or this is going out to some known bad sites. Or maybe you do have some sort of endpoint protection, such as Symantec, McAfee, Sophos, maybe, Bit9. You have something on the endpoint that's monitoring the system actively, and that's, another way we can get alerts. All right, so just some common areas of infection and artifacts we can find, and by no means is this a comprehensive list. I mean, as you deal with incident to incident, they can change. You might find something new. That's kind of how, I came to this is, hey, we had these different incidents. I'm like, hey, this was different, even though it was the same type of variant of malware. They did this, they changed that. But some common areas is the user profile. That seems to be a common way to go to the Windows with the Windows infection. All right, the user's app data local, or they'll create some folder called Adobe, and it's not really Adobe, things like that. Also, registry run keys. That's a great way for malware to maintain persistence. Okay, where basically they put it in the user's run key. All right, or it's if I can remember off the top of my head here. It's basically software current version, Microsoft Windows current version run. All right, so that's where you would typically find that. Also, there's also the HKey local machine with the same type of path as well. As we saw, I don't know if anyone's heard of Palix. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Palix malware that's been going around lately. That was kind of a kicker, right? Because it had a new auto run. That wasn't even detected in Mr. Mark Rusinovich's auto runs, all right, but that's how I was able to maintain malware, resident-only malware, in memory, all right. It was in a different CLS ID. I forget the exact location of it, but it was basically an unknown way to maintain persistence. Also, browser history and caches is a great place to find artifacts, and we'll see that in some examples in a moment here. But just to look at some common registry run keys, like I mentioned to you before, we see in the first example up there, it's just some name that got created. Typically, it's just automatically generated. We can see that it was put in C users Ryan app data local. That's where the exe is. And it's also one of my favorite places to first look for, malware when I'm, looking at an incident, because it's typically my first piece of the puzzle. If I can identify, how the malware is maintaining persistence, and I can get an indicator right away, I then can get, create a date and time. I can look at other files that were created during that date and time as well, and that could help, build my puzzle, give me a more clear picture. And as we see below, I kind of blacked out the username there because this was from the actual incident for this malware. The above was from my sandbox. All right, and we can see here that it actually had several pieces of malware set to auto run when the user actually logged in. So when the user actually logs into the machine, it's going to the registry run key. It's going to try to run these executables right there from those locations. All right, so looking at the user profile examples here, we can just see the user app data local temp, like I mentioned before. We see the person downloaded Wesley Chapel type easy pass. This was actually related to, I believe, it was like the bus or the toll system. But it could be really anything. I've seen court notice, I've seen funeral notice, I've seen all kinds of different types of notices that come through users' email and webmail, corporate and personal. All right, and then below is just another example of the app data local folder and just some artifacts found in there. And you can see that they tried to kind of, mask the executable by just trying to change the icon to look like something maybe you're used to, things like that. All right, one of my favorite folders also to go to is the prefetch folder. Does anyone know what the prefetch folder is for? No? Come on, someone's got no. Yeah. What's it for? Can you say it for me?
It pulls all the system settings and handles for a program when it runs so that it can run faster the next time. Run everything that loads in seconds without that program.
Right, exactly. And just to kind of summarize that answer, if a program actually ran, it's going to log it into the prefetch folder, right? So in most cases, and again I say in most cases, okay, if an executable actually runs, it's going to create a prefetch folder, or create a file in the prefetch folder for you, okay? So that's another good way to say, hey, I see you have malware on the machine, did it actually run? All right, so check the prefetch folder. If it's there, that's a good indicator that yes, it indeed ran on the system, and you have a further issue. All right, looking at the browser history and the cache, I found this particularly interesting with this, and I actually use just some of the free Nearsoft tools to grab this information. So again, most of the stuff that I use and I show in this presentation are actually free tools that you can download and use. Some might have some minimal cost if you want some upgrades, and I'll share some of those as well. But this was just the Nearsoft IE cache tool. And basically what we could see here from this malware incident is the user did indeed download this voicemail Wesley Chapel zip with that phone number. And this is one of those, you have a voicemail from like WhatsApp or something like that. They click it, they download it. It shows the link that they went to where they got it. So that kind of helps with some of your, if you want to put something in your SIM or if you want to block something at the proxy. All right, so you have that URL right there. And then we could see that after it ran, it created some nice cache files here. All right, gives you, the IP that it went to. It has some similar structure as far as the string for the folder. Also a nice index.php in there. And what I found very interesting when I found these is that these were simple text documents that had the word none in them. Just the word none. None, 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 none. Let's see, I'll go to the next one. Except for one of them. After I went through the ones that had none, I came across one that had this string. I said, well, this is definitely not the word none, and it looks pretty interesting to me. So looking at it, and I don't know why, I said, this looks like base 64. Okay, so let me go online, find a base 64 decoder, and punch it in. So I did so, and here's what it comes out to be when you actually decode that. All right, what this is it looks like an actual config to connect to another IP. All right, and to probably just log in and check in with the machine with the botnet. Okay, so we can see here you have your root tag, then you have a type tag, then you have your server tag, which is IP 146.185.235.30. Which, if you put that in a GeoIP tool, I know it's not necessarily 100% accurate, but it goes to St. Petersburg, Russia, as the geolocation for that. Then it proceeds to log in with the local host address 127.0.0.1. Looks like no password, just a way to say, hey, yeah, I'm here. So if you don't have something like geoprotection on or something like that, blocking Russia, or if you're not looking for maybe those known bad IPs, this would just go right through, say, yeah, this machine's infected, and you can, issue a commands, things like that. All right, so memory analysis of malware. This was a kind of a thing that me and a partner of mine started over a year ago where we work, and it was really beneficial for us. So far to date, I think we've been pretty successful with it. We so far have, last year we identified 75 pieces of malware that our endpoint didn't directly identify. Okay. Now, when I say 75 pieces of malware, that's not 75 brand new variants. It was only really a couple, maybe 3 or 4 variants that were different. But these guys, they like to re-roll their stuff, okay, and just resend it out, make some new phishing emails. You click on the link, and it happens all over again, right? So, like I said, been pretty good. The tools that we use to capture RAM is Belka by Belkasoft. It's free. RAM capture tool. I think it's called Belka RAM Capture. And it does a really good job. And after that, we use volatility just to do some parsing of it. And we're going to go into that in a minute here as well. But just to talk about Belka RAM Capture, we would use it directly on the suspect machine itself. All right. And if it was a remote, all machines, I guess, were technically remote. But we would use PSExec. So we would copy the Belka RAM Capture tool to the machine, use PSExec to remotely connect to the machine, okay? And then we would just, use the executable from there, and it didn't pop up a GUI or anything, in case you're wondering, from that level. That way the user, hey, what's this pop-up thing? So we run, RAM capture, then you name it, your file name, and I would like DD. You could use .mem, but I like DD because we also have a tool that is not free called Internet Evidence Finder. And what I realized is if I name my memory capture to .dd, Internet Evidence Finder actually recognized it. And then you could leverage that tool against the memory as well. And then you could get internet-related artifacts and as well as other activities that were going on. Just a kind of a thing I tried out, and it worked out. In which now I noticed that Magnet Forensics actually now has their own RAM capture tool that I have not tried out yet. All right, so with volatility, okay, there's a couple things you need to know before you start. Okay, first off, it's a great tool. It's a free tool that you can download. Pretty good tutorials on how to use it. Really good documentation. They do a great job as far as updating it and keeping it maintained. And it can give you a lot of good information. Okay, so the -F option is something you're going to need because that's going to actually select your memory file name. You have to have that. If you don't know what your profile is for like the machine that you captured it on, for example, if you captured it on a Windows XP machine or a Windows 7 machine, you would need to run the image info command. So if you weren't sure, you can run that, and it could give you some suggested profiles, as you can see highlighted there. For this machine, it says, hey, try Win7SP0 check 86 or Win7SP1 check 86. And I know just because it was the machine I worked on, it was a Win7SP1 check 86. All right, cool. So as I mentioned, you have to use the -- profile. All right, it's a must in volatility, and that will basically allow it to parse correctly at that point. All right, and then once the profile is selected, we can run a number of commands and plugins to identify the information. All right, there are a lot of commands. There's a ton built in that come right out of the box. Typically, I just use the standalone Windows one that you can download for free. If you need to get really in depth, you can install Python and do the full-on version on Windows, or you can do it on the Linux side, which I have to do for some things. I have a Linux box that has volatility, the full version. I got to do a couple things with it. But for the most part, the Windows standalone version, it does a really good job as far as doing what I needed to do in most cases. So again, there's a lot built in. There's also a lot that the community will create as Python scripts, and you can download those and put them into the correct, folder structures and run those. So below, the commands I've listed below are the 4 that I go to in almost every incident that, I'll probably just say every incident, among others that I go to, but these are the 4 that I definitely go to. The first one is the pslist command, which will display the running processes in memory. All right, very important. And we're going to see that in a moment. Also the netscan command, which is for Windows 7 and older. If you're using Windows XP, you would use the conscan command to get the same type of information out of it. This will display your connections in memory and attempts to tie it to a process, which is very important. So if you can tie a network connection to a known process, you can say, hey, This process is the one that's actually trying to go out to China or trying to go out to Russia, or it's going out exfiltrating stuff, okay? PSX View, I use it in conjunction with PSList because it will attempt to identify hidden processes. So it's going to look for, you know, certain processes and threads and stuff that are trying to hide itself from the system, okay? And then Malfind. Malfind is great. It looks for malicious characteristics of specified processes and can dump the processes. And you can actually get pretty detailed as far as what you want to do. You don't have to say, you know, Malfind on the whole thing. It's going to look through every single process. Or you can specify a singular process and it'll look at only that particular one. And we'll go through how we can actually leverage these commands, then finally get to the Malfind to extract memory, or extract the malware out of memory. All right. So about ready for our demo. We're going to utilize those 4 specified commands and plugins, and we can also pipe those results out to text files, which I would highly recommend you do. And you'll see how we could tie those other tools to identify malware. And then I don't think I have internet, but you could actually upload those suspect files to VirusTotal, or you can actually upload them to your vendor if it's not detecting it, so that way they can create a signature on it, and that way you can find 2 or 3 more boxes later that get popped with it. So, all right. So let's go ahead and go to this, and we'll talk about volatilities and strings in a minute. So let's see here. So demo time. Hopefully it'll be all right. Let's see. Oh, come on. Shift right click. Go. All right. Stop where I want to be. All right. So right now, let's make sure we're in the right location. Yes, we got volatility. All right, so basically I have my mem capture here. It's right here. It's called, can everyone see that? Okay. It's 2014-10-24. So basically this incident occurred on October 24th, 2014. And then I basically created a sandbox environment for the same incident and kind of replicated it. All right. So we're actually looking at my, my VirtualBox memory here. Okay, so if we go volatility, dash F, we'll do 2014, profile, 7SP1, checking 6. I think that's everything there. So first we're just going to run the PSList command and see what comes back here. So it's churning, and as we can see, when we run the PSList command, it indeed brings back some processes that we're running from, that I pulled from memory. And we can even kind of see right here, it says label underscore US Wesley Chapel. It doesn't say the full thing, but that's what it is, the label underscore US Wesley Chapel. And while this is really nice and everything, like I said, you could pipe out your results. And so I would highly recommend that you do that. So we'll just call this R1, this underscore PSList. Demo.text. .text. So let this run, let it churn. Okay, it's done. Okay, and it's right here. So we'll just open it up right up in my favorite tool, Notepad. Okay. All right. Okay. Due to the resolution, it's not exactly as nice as I would like it, but it's good enough. All right, so as we can see at the top, what I'm mainly interested in, okay, is the PID, the PID, and the PPID, okay? So if we look through here, we know we're looking for label underscore Wesley Chapel. So here we go. its PID is 164, and its parent PID, its parent process ID, is going to be 2024, okay? So if we look at 2024, we can see what spawned off that process. It's going to be explorer.exe, all right? Well, that makes sense. Explorer spawned that up, no big deal. But we know that its PID was 164. So let's see now if there's any processes that have the parent ID of 164. Oh, sure enough, we do. Just remember this other column here is the parent one. And look, we have this SVC host right here. Okay. So SVC host is what? It's, it's the general Windows executable that does a lot of different functions for the Windows system, right? So basically what this malware did is it said, hey, I know that people are not typically going to look for SVC hosts, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to inject myself into an SVC host process and kind of hope that you really don't, look at it. And we know this PID is now 3332, 3,332. Okay, cool. So we have that information. Okay. Actually, before that, I'm just going to do the PSX view real quick, and there really wasn't anything odd about this one because it wasn't really trying to hide itself, but just to kind of show you what it looks like, I'm going to do that real quick. PSX view demo.text. Come on, there you go. And like I said, PSX view is going to, basically check the processes to see if it's trying to hide itself from the system in any way. And it's running. Well, it's taking a little longer than I thought it would. I think I already have one here. Let's take a look. All right, so here's the PSX view here. So you see it's checking it basically against all these different other measures. It's checking against PSList, PSScan, ThreadProc, and a couple of others. And it's saying, can I see this? Yeah, true, I can, or false, I can't. And if you scroll down, there's going to be some stuff that it's going to be hiding us from the system, but we don't see any of the actual malicious processes, which remember was 164. It's hiding itself from a couple, but it's seen in most of them, as well as the SVC host, which if I find that one is up here, and it's really not trying to hide itself. It's and true in most of them. Okay. And it did look like it finished, and just to see if we got the same results, and indeed we did. Okay, so the next tool for volatility we'll look at is the NetScan one. NetScan. NetScan underscore text. All right. And again, what NetScan is going to do is going to look for network connections and try to tie those to a process. And just kind of as a disclosure, if you do have it behind a proxy, you may not get the results you're really looking for. I had this going directly through a firewall, and that was the best results. Anytime I was going through a proxy, I would kind of get a mixed bag of results, okay, because it's seeing that proxy IP and it's not actually seeing the external interface. And at times it was hiding the process from me. It wouldn't display it. Okay, so let's take a look at that. I guess I got out of it. Let's see. NetScan, there we go. All right. All right, so we know our bad processes are 164 and 3332. So if we look for them, okay, it's 164. Nope, can't find it. Okay. And let's look for 3332. Okay, sure enough, we found the PID 332. It's tied to SVC host. Oh, and look, it's connecting from our internal IP to this external IP 7032.75.58 port 8080. Okay. So that's kind of nice because we can see a couple things here. It's using TCP4, it's using just your general IPv4. It's an established connection. We got the PID, so we can tie that back to our PS list. Okay, and we can see again, it's this SVC host that's actually making the call out to the IP address, which I did look up the IP this morning because I forgot where it went to, but it's just a city in California. All right, so attackers, while they're all over the world and stuff, they also use United States-based IPs, UK-based IPs. They could use any country they want for their IPs. So. Okay. Now, last but not least, and again, this is just a basic overview of all of these of these options in volatility. Volatility is very powerful and can give you a lot of information from memory. This is just really scratching the surface. So after this, if you're interested in it, I really would encourage you to go to their website, look up some of the commands, and just maybe download a challenge or something and just go at it, because it will force you to use a lot of other stuff to find the information you're looking for. All right, so let's go ahead and do the malfind. The malfind, we got to do it a little bit differently. So if we remember correctly, our malicious process IDs were 164 and 3,332. So we got malfind. All right, I'm actually going to call the process with the -P option. All right, I'm going to try 164. And then the -D will actually try to dump the process out, okay? So that's what that's going to do. And do I have any folders in here already? Yeah, I do. Okay. So D, I'm just typing in 164. So you'll know if it found something because you'll see some stuff, it's basically assembly language code, pop up on the screen, okay? And that's how you'll know that it indeed found something. With process ID 164, it did not, okay? So likely what this, this label _ US Wesley Chapel EXE was just the initial dropper, called out somewhere else real quick to download extra, another malicious file, and then it goes on from there. So now let's go ahead and take a look at process ID 3,332. Oh, there we go. We got some assembly language stuff here. Okay, gives us that information here. Cool. So now what we can actually do is I dumped it in this folder here, and actually dumped the processes straight from memory out to your folder here. Now, just kind of a fair warning, if since this is older and now it is actually detected, if I didn't have this into an exceptions folder, my AV would say, hey, this is bad, stuff like that. So just kind of keep that in mind. But like I said, this was an incident that I did back in October, early November. Okay, so we have a couple different process IDs here. It's like, great, well, what do I do with these? You know what I mean? Well, you can do a couple things. What I'm really looking for is executables, all right? And the file header for an executable is hex 4D5A, or better known as MZ ASCII, okay? So I can see right there, I know that I pulled at least one executable out of this thing, okay? So that's really what I'm looking for. So what I do is I go to my favorite hex editor, WinHex, right here. This is actually the free version of it. Okay, I do have a license of it that allows me a lot more forensic features, but it's not needed for this demo. So the free version can actually allow you to do this. And just a forewarning, the biggest hindrance that I had was that if I wanted to copy data out of hex into a new file, there was a 200 KB limit. All right, so the license that it cost me was $300. I think it was $300 well spent for this product for a year worth of updates and stuff like that. So we're going to go open our files. We get dumped in a .dmp format by default. And open. Okay. So we have our processes here. I don't like this view. Okay. So as we can see over here, all right, we have the 4D5A hex right here. Let me see if I can make this a little bit easier on myself just for right now. I want to go here, 32, change this to 16. All right, cool. I like this a little bit better. So as we can see, it dumped this, executable out right here. And typically, this is what I would be looking for. I'm looking for this type of stuff, all right? I'm looking for the malicious processes themselves, all right? See if there's anything in here. And sometimes you never know what you pull out. And honestly, just on a side note from this presentation, if you do any investigations of any kind, I would highly recommend that you pull memory. Memory can give you so much information that you didn't even know it was there. You're talking like, passwords or, stuff that you can't find. I would say I don't want to go into it because I don't want to get myself in trouble, but pull memory for your investigations because you'll never know what you get with it, and it's proven to be so beneficial in so many different ways. It's usually the first thing that I go for. Before a disk image or anything, I want the memory, okay? So just for the sake of time, I know where I want to go. It's this third process that it dumped. And what I noticed here, and with this specific variant of malware, it didn't happen like this all the time. But it got to a point to where I noticed that there was this data here, and then if I scroll down just a little bit, where are you at? Right here. Look at that. So actually it has some padding before the executable. Now, I was asking myself, and I asked several people, I'm like, all right, is this something that volatility is doing? Is it somehow putting it there? And I didn't get a clear answer on that from the people that I talked to. We were just, researchers, just some guy, like me, just trying to figure this stuff out. But being that I have dealt with the same variant of malware, and this executable that I'm about to extract is indeed malicious, and I found it in previous versions that did not have this padding, I would assume that it was put there by it, just based on my other research with this variant. Cool. So with WinHex, one of my favorite features I could do is I can just kind of keep track of my offsets here. So this is a decimal offset of 1,184, as you can see here or down here. And I just kind of keep that in my head. And then I'll scroll down to the bottom of this executable. And here's the last one right here. 67,139 is my offset. You can go to edit. You can define your block as 1,184. And because I remembered the first offset, I don't have to remember the last because it's right here for me. 67,139. Okay, great. So it selects all that for me. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, where's I going to copy block? That's right. I'm going to copy the block into a new file. Okay. So I'm just going to name this as suspect.exe. I just now extracted that executable away from that padding into its own file, so now I have that raw executable piece of malware right now on my machine. Okay, definitely not going to double click it, but I can submit it to VirusTotal. I could submit it to any sandboxes. If I have my own sandbox, I could submit it to it, and then I could let it do further analysis. Or if I was doing any type of, what's the word I'm looking for, assembly language type breaking into reverse engineering malware, you could put it into something like IDA Pro or something like that and really start to try to break apart the executable. All right. There's your Wi-Fi. I don't see any decent open Wi-Fi right now, so I'm not going to try it. But one thing I did want to show you is that whenever I uploaded the original file to VirusTotal, and I wish I could show you, but I can't. But whenever I uploaded the original file up to VirusTotal, a few vendors, mostly no-name vendors, saw it as a potential issue. When I uploaded this, it was night and day difference about the people who caught it over just that few lines of code. All right. So I mean that just kind of shows you that how AV can be bypassed, or it's not seeing everything even though something's there. All right. So I submitted this to my vendor, and then they created a signature for me, and then not only did we benefit, but anyone else who uses that vendor also got that signature as well through their definition updates. All right. So that's basically the process of how I go about, okay, if I have this malware incident, I have a user who went to their webmail, their personal webmail, clicked on a link that said, oh my gosh, I got a court notice. It said I had to be at court. They clicked it. I then go to their machine. I say, okay, this is the file they downloaded. They actually extracted it. They ran the executable because I was able to, identify that in prefetch. I went, saw how the malware is maintaining persistence because it created a registry run key. All right, and so it started up every time the user logged in. I then extracted that memory. I then performed volatility to find out the running process IDs, performed the netscan command to identify the network connections, extracted it out, and then got a signature created. So that was kind of quick overview of kind of birth to death type of that malware that I identified there. All right. So let's go back to the presentation real quick. And I really wish I had more time. I feel like I'm kind of trying to rush this, but I really wanted to show you guys the demo piece of the volatility and the WinHex, and I thought that was really kind of cool and important to this demonstration. All right, volatility in strings. This is a really awesome thing that I cannot take credit for. We found this online a long time ago, and I don't remember where, but it's really awesome. All right, so if you just have strings in Linux or the system terminal strings, you can run this command here, strings-q-o, which -q is really just quiet, and -o has to do with the offsets that it has within the text file itself. You pipe that out to a text file, then you can actually take that and rerun the volatility memory capture against the strings, and it can actually build context to your strings, which when I figured this out, or when I found it, whatever you want to call it, I was like, oh, this is fantastic, okay? Because look here, over here, I know I don't necessarily have it, but this is like a virtual offset here of the memory. I have, remember, 3,332, that was our PID, okay? And then this is some other, honestly, I don't know what this was for, but this is other information related to the system. But we see here that it's going out, HTTP to this IP address, port 8080 to an index.php page. So we can say for sure that this tried to at least go there, right, from the machine. And again, that's from running strings and parsing that out. You can also find some indicators here. This was actually a kind of a profane word that was in the actual executable itself when you ran the strings command. Okay, so you can actually maybe build, if you use Yara rules or anything like that, you could build Yara rules against this to scan, and those are some key indicators right there. All right, so we have, again, that derogatory word, as well as, for group, and there is some other ones, I think like for base was for another one in there, and just so stuff like that can really help you and identify this stuff. All right, briefly, I do want to talk to you about the Cuckoo Sandbox, all right? I wish I could take more credit for it at where I work with it, but really my partner in my crime who helps me with this stuff, he was the one who really kind of installed it and got it going. It's a free open source sandbox, okay? Basically, you stand up a Linux workstation or server and it uses Apache for the web front end, and then you actually create your own VirtualBox images. And what you could do with it is you can actually submit malware samples to it, and it'll detonate it in the VirtualBox engine. So, it's VirtualBox, so it's nothing like, a FireEye or any of the commercial tools out there like Palo Alto, Wildfire, anything like that. But, if the malware indeed stops and it says, hey, it has a VM detect capability, that in it of itself is really suspicious, right? Because it's trying to look to see if it's in a VM. All right. So you guys can check out their website with it. You just type in Cuckoo Sandbox. And they recommend Ubuntu spinning up some VirtualBox VMs. And with your own setup, you can actually build in the volatility plugins. So when you submit the malware sample, it'll actually run volatility on the VM itself and actually give you a report of that as well as the other stuff. So it kind of does some of that work for you, but it requires much more time. Much more time. It's allow the volatility to run rather than not. All right. All right, so just talking about some tools and links and some of the stuff I talked about. The base64 decode, I use that to basically decode that string. I didn't do it by hand, I'm not going to lie. For the RAM capture, I use the Belkasoft RAM capture tool, again free for you to download and use. They do have their own suite of tools that you could pay for and use, but the RAM capture tool is free. I use several of the Nearsoft tools to identify internet-related artifacts and history on the machines themselves. Okay, I have 3 links for volatility here. Their newer website, I believe, is the Volatility Foundation, but their Code Google page has a lot of great tutorials on how to use the plugins and what they do and what their purpose is. It's kind of how I got started on it. I didn't use VirusTotal or Malware.com, but VirusTotal, you can upload files to it and it can see if other people see it as bad. Malware.com, they basically are, they're not commercial, they're free for you guys to use, but basically they're a website that has the Cuckoo running in their on their system infrastructure. So if you want to submit a sample to malware.com, you can make it public or private, and they'll actually detonate it in their Cuckoo environment and then give you the report, which is so awesome. I wish I could show you because it'll tell you the strings, it will tell you what it tries to do, if it creates new files, if it creates registry keys, if it does any internet or network related activity and it finds it, it'll give you a PCAP. I mean, and for free, it's just fantastic. All right. Again, the cuckoosandbox.org. You can actually stand up your own Cuckoo Sandbox if you want and get that installed. The X-Ways, they are the makers of WinHex. Okay. and that was a hex editor that I showed you. And then there's Anubis, which I didn't mention previously, but it's another free sandboxing tool where they accept executables and APK files. They also now have a commercial tool called Lastline, I believe. But Anubis, as far as I know, is still up, and it is free for you guys to use. And this is really my last slide, so I'll leave it up if you guys want to take notes or anything like that. And I really, the goal of this presentation was to show you that, hey, automated tools are not going to catch everything. You do need some context, I think, if you have an event or an incident that it doesn't detect that you can go in and look for yourself, okay? And then, go in there, find it, and identify it, and get it found for the next guy. So with that said, does anyone have any questions? Awesome, no questions. Oh, no. And you need to make sure that you fit over the tower to point blank. Yes, great question. So the question was, what if you have a remote site that maybe doesn't have a good network connection and you're capturing memory from there? I would still follow the same process. I would copy my Belco RAM capture tool to it. I would create the image of memory. I would actually leave it on the system, okay? I would then call the user themselves, say, hey, you have an issue with your machine, we're gonna come pick it up. Since I have the image in memory, I really don't care if they power it off at that point, and then they can go and power off the machine. I'll actually drive out to the remote site and pick it up, because that does happen in some cases where it's a slow WAN link, and copying 3 or 4 gigs of memory is not going to be beneficial for the network team, and they're going to say, hey, what are you doing? So great question. Any other questions? Okay, yes sir, right here. So the question was that header that when we were looking at the WinHex demonstration of the file, was that from volatility or not? Are you referring to the padding that was above the executable? In my opinion, and this is strictly my opinion, and I don't know, I do not think it was from volatility. I think it was, volatility is trying to pull it from memory. And I say that because I had other similar examples of this malware, which was the Asprox botnet, which was known to hit, financial industries and retail industries and several other industries. I pulled it and I found that same, I say same, the MD5 was different, but it was the same function executable without the padding. So I had other examples to go with it saying that did not happen before. So my assumption would be it was actually from memory itself, and maybe it was some way to obfuscate or try to evade, but I don't have a 100% answer on that. Good question. There was another question. Sir. Please repeat that. Yes. If you want my PowerPoint presentation, I'd be happy to share that with you. I'm on LinkedIn, or if you see me, I will give you an email address to contact me. Cool. Any other questions? Sir. So basically, this was part of the Asprox botnet. So once that initial Wesley Chapel piece was downloaded, that was just a dropper piece to connect out somewhere else. It then downloaded this other piece of malware. This was basically used as the command and control. So whatever command was sent to it, that's what it would do. So like I said, the Asprox botnet was definitely known for utilizing the botnets for SQL injection attacks back in the day. They were used to actually attack Sony several years back. But really, it's up to the mind of the creator for the malware at that point, right? Do they want to try to install other software to try to steal your information? Do they want to use you in a DDoS? That's up to them. Once they have that communication channel back and forth, it's up to them. So we caught this pretty quickly. The machine was off within a day, so it didn't really have any other artifacts to go with after that. So once I was able to identify it, I grabbed the memory out. I left it on for a little bit, and I was watching it in our SIM tool that we have, and then we actually utilize geoprotection a lot. So if it tries to go one of those known bad actor countries, it's just going to drop it before it gets out the door, which in a lot of cases is really beneficial to us. But we did not identify any other activity at that point in time. Does that answer your question, sir? Okay, great. Another question? Yes, sir. Can you repeat that, please? All right, so the question was, what about malware with embedded systems? And just to be honest with you, I have not had an incident to where I've had to work on that yet. Okay, so I don't know one way or another, but once I would assume though, once I have an image in memory, my process would still be the same. I just might have to use different set. For example, if it's a Linux kernel, Volatility has different Linux commands for Linux. Okay, which a lot of your embedded type stuff or appliance type stuff use some sort of Linux kernel at that point, right? So, just to be honest there. Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir?
Malware based off of the recent disclosure of malware being hidden in hard drive.
I'll repeat that one more time, sorry.
There's recent disclosure from Kaspersky Guy with hardware or malware being embedded in hard drive firmware.
Right.
Do you have any comments on like the evolution of this?
Right. So the comment was basically hardware embedded malware or malware in the firmware. That's a great question because that's kind of been in the topic of the news lately. And just my opinions on that. Well, remember, guys, what we looked at today was basically user land. So it's not going to you're not going to be able to do find it there unless there's some other tool that I don't know about, which is definitely possible. But when it comes to that, I mean, that's how nation states really are, trying to bug systems, right? They're putting firmware, infected firmware stuff into devices to gain the back door. I think it's definitely a sneaky way, and I think it's definitely going to evolve the defense, right? Because that's a relatively new form of an attack, and I say relatively, we've seen that over the past couple of years. I don't think there's really been, a good defense for that, but hopefully one will be built. But between that and malware resident only, or malware that's memory resident only, like with the recent Powlix, I mean, I think that's going to be a new evolutionary trend to where, hey, I have this disk image, but now there's no evidence at all, not even in the prefetch or anything that malware existed because it was all running in memory and it was based off of a certain registry key calling DLL host running a JavaScript. That's it. Any other questions? Well, that said, I really do appreciate you coming out to see my presentation, and I hope it was informative, and I hope you could take some of these techniques and tools back. And again, most of everything I showed you is free that you can actually download and use for yourself. All right. So, again, thank you very much. Go over.
Real quick announcement, lunch is going to be served here at noon underneath the stairwell right over here. It's a lunch box. I think there's a couple choices to pick from. The next keynote speaker will be at 1:30 in the adjoining conference room. It will be Mr. Dave Chronister will be speaking on the subject of vendor-induced security issues, and that starts at 1:30.
That's good for the embedded one. Should have recommended that at the time.